Welcome to Autistic People Talking, a podcast where autistic people talk. Hello and welcome. My name is Claire and this is my channel, Woodshed Theory. Here, I make content about what it is like to live as an adult on the autism spectrum and whatever else feels good to me. So if that sounds good to you, or if you're feeling particularly gracious today, and I hope that you are, please go ahead and click the subscribe button, ring the bell. I almost forgot to mention that I put out videos a few times a week, so click the like and the share. Welcome, 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 everyone, to Autistic People Talking, a podcast where autistic people talk. It's very original. Today, we are very excited to welcome a special guest. She is a rising star on YouTube. She makes wonderful content about being an autistic adult, and she has a wonderful fan base who has requested her over and over again to be on the podcast. Everyone, welcome Meg from I'm Autistic. Now what?
That was such a cool way, a cool intro. That's a great way of saying the name. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here because I've been watching your videos for ages. I think the first time I ever saw one of your videos, I think it was when you were with Taylor, when you collaborated with her. I think that's how I found your channel. And all I remember is you talking about, I think I mentioned it in one of my first videos, is you talking about how you, like, the stereotype of autistic people is not liking being touched. And you were talking about like how you used to like hug people a lot and like how that was like not always a good thing, but like the other way. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. And I would then start thinking of all these times where I'd like awkwardly hugged people and it hadn't gone down very well. And I was like, oh.
I've seen things now where people is it Kaylin from Love on the Spectrum
Oh
US?
yeah.
I saw something that she did where she was teaching like the levels of like who you can hug, and I was like, where were you
Mm-hmm.
when I needed you the
Exactly.
most? Because
Exactly. And for
I
me, it would, there's some people who, I feel like some people have different rules though. You know, like some very extroverted people can be like, oh, I'm just a hugger and hug everyone. And it just, for some reason, it's fine when they do it. But then when I do it, it can be a bit, a bit off key, like not quite the right thing to do. I don't know.
okay,
I
but
just feel like some people are above the rules.
before we get into our talking, why don't you tell us about yourself and your channel and why? My favorite question: why do you think you're here?
Whenever you ask other people I'm like instantly in like the doctor's office or like a therapy session or something. Okay, so yeah, I'm Meg. I have a channel. I'm Autistic Now What, where I talk about being autistic and being late diagnosed, as you know, many of us were diagnosed in my mid-20s, trying to figure out now what, because that was kind of how I felt at the time. It was very emotional. It wasn't necessarily entirely a positive thing when I found out. I felt like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, great. I know why I'm so different and why I don't fit in, but I don't really know what to do about that. So that was kind of the original thought. And I've always enjoyed making YouTube videos. Like, I've had loads of channels since about 2008, just doing like random stuff. It's never like taken off before. So yeah, I just thought, oh, I'll bring those two things together and I'll talk about it and it's become a thing.
Wait, so you're saying that when you found out you were autistic, it wasn't because you wanted to be seen as cool and you weren't trying to like solidify how trendy you
You
were?
know, I saw one TikTok and I thought I really liked their blue hair and maybe I can be just like them. And then I bought a slug fidget and then I went, I'm autistic. And I was officially diagnosed in that moment.
Wow, is that how it works? I wish
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had
you have to get the
known that.
slug fidget.
Crap. Okay. Would a real slug work? No, sorry. It wouldn't. Probably not. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to fidget with a real slug. I don't know. Sorry, everyone's clicked off now. The retention of this video, like you're gonna be like, what is that moment in the graph? And then you'll slug fidget.
Okay. Well, now that I've ruined the interview, what would you say to an autistic person who's just finding out that they're autistic?
I would say you need to give yourself time. You need to let yourself feel a lot of things that are going to be difficult to feel. And the way that you feel immediately is not probably how you're going to feel in even a few weeks, a few months' time. You need to give the people around you time to understand as well, because people are going to say a lot of things that aren't perfect, probably to start with. Like my husband had no idea what autism was at all. And now he's very understanding. But at first, he was like, really? He was quite skeptical when I first told him. Um, and I think again, like with the whole unmasking thing, you might hear a lot of people say online that you need to just unmask and like be yourself now. And I think in a way that can sometimes make you mask as an autistic person, if that makes sense. You can like construct a new mask of like what you think an autistic person should be like. And I think like we've said, I feel like we're both still on our journey of, and we probably always will be. I don't know, will it ever be finished? When do you go like, oh, I'm unmasked now? Like, I don't know. I think it takes time. You got to give yourself time to get used to it. And to maybe you will have to go back and process a bunch of stuff that happened in your past, and that isn't the most fun thing, but it won't feel as raw forever.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks. That
That's
was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today. Everyone, if you have not checked out Meg's channel, what are you doing? Where have you been? Are you living under a rock? And if so, that's fine. We support that here.
Yeah.
But definitely go and check out her channel. I'm autistic, now what? And hopefully this won't be our last conversation. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank
All
you
right.
very much for having me.
Bye, everybody. So you said you were in your mid-20s when you got your autism diagnosis. What had you start to explore that?
So a lot of people say it was because they had children and then they found out their children were autistic and then they were diagnosed because of that. And for me, it was kind of because I had a child, but he is actually not autistic. But I think it was just the whole process of going through pregnancy and having a child was just very, very difficult for me. And I would look around at other people and you'd see other people posting parenting content and people in real life. And I was like, oh, I seem to be having a bit of a different experience with this than other people do. Like it seems to be a bit harder for me. And then I think just like all of the coping mechanisms I'd had in place up until that point just kind of fell apart because you can't have your routines anymore. Like I would eat exactly the same amount of food every day and I would track my food. I would like exercise at very set times. Like I had this very, very rigid kind of thing that I would do every day. I'm not like perfect at sticking to things being at certain times because I'm completely time blind and whatever. But I had like a life that was very manageable to me. And then it just gets kind of blown up when you have a child. And everything that you hear is like you'll have all of these hormones and it will be like your calling. And even though you'll have to stay up all night, it'll be magical because it's what you were made to do. And I was waiting for that to happen and I didn't really feel like that. It was very, very difficult. And then it kind of brought out issues that I'd had in the past when I'd been in education and struggling. And I just felt like, I don't know, I need some help. And then that's what kind of led me on a pathway to researching things and then finding people talking about being autistic. And I was like, oh yeah, okay.
And when you were younger, because I know in some of your videos you show footage of you stimming as a child and different things like that. So what, looking back, were there things where you're like, well, of course I was autistic. How did nobody notice?
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know if you feel the same now. It just feels so stupidly obvious
Well,
that you're
yeah.
just
Are you
like,
kidding me?
how?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I don't understand. But I think with like because my stimming was quite I hear from a lot of people. I don't know if you know what your stimming was like when you were a child. Do you have any like
A lot of singing. Like
oh
a lot. Like,
amazing.
please stop.
Oh, and now you've got your intro. That's so cute.
I know, and people are still like, please stop.
No, they're not. If you imagine if you did stop, there'd be like an uprising.
There'd be an uprising. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
you have to carry on forever now.
No, that's my biggest hate comment that I get is like, please stop. And I'm like, well, at least they were polite.
No, yeah, this is I'm please. Yeah. Yeah, I just get because I laugh quite a lot when I'm speaking. I just get, why are you giggling? She's annoying. I mean, I
Mm,
get also I don't really read that much anymore because you get all sorts of stuff. I also get that you just don't have a dad. Like you're not autistic, you just don't have a dad. And I'm like, kind of right, but
I've
also
never
not.
heard that before.
Yeah, I don't know.
And
Some
not
people just
like
want to blame
I don't
everything.
know that about you, but I've never heard that as a that's the stupidest, sorry if that's too much to say on a podcast. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I don't know. You get all sorts of things. Yeah, it's a good guess, I guess, to make that somebody somebody didn't have the most present father figure. It's quite a good guess, but no, doesn't make someone autistic.
Oh, I've never heard that before. I wouldn't even know how to respond. Like, I think my response would be to that person would be, "Are you okay?"
That one made me laugh. I mean, to be honest, I haven't really had that. I can't really think of any that have actually made me upset. Maybe in the beginning when you feel like very vulnerable, there's
Yeah.
just a lot of people saying you're not autistic. Like, or I don't like it when people try and diagnose me with personality disorders. That also, I just,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes people actually say it from like a kind of good place. But I don't know, I find that a bit like, and I notice people do it to other people online quite a lot as well. And I'm like, maybe we shouldn't armchair diagnose people
Well, yeah,
with
I get more nervous about, and I'm sure you get this as well, where people will be like, send you a list of bullet points, and then they'll be like, "Am I autistic?"
Oh
And then
yeah.
you're like, I can't say.
Yeah, you can't
You know,
say
like
no.
I would
Hmm.
never, like I could say sounds like you have a few of the traits, maybe you should go get that checked out, but I can't. That sounds
Yeah.
like a logistical nightmare to me to be like, "Sure."
Yeah, yeah.
A lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah, because you don't want to say, well, definitely not. You're like, well, you could be. Yeah, it's tricky.
I don't know what's going on in your mind. Or like dating
Cool.
advice, stuff like that. Like I get more nervous about that when I'm reading the comments than I do when people are saying, "Oh, you're not autistic. You should show this to the doctor who diagnosed you," and they would say the same
Mhm.
thing, like that kind of thing. But I don't I don't know that I've really had anything where maybe in the beginning. I think you're right. In the beginning, it would like take up more space in my mind, and now I'm just like um people who are listening to the podcast, this will be new information. I don't know that I've said this. I just screenshot it and send it to my other YouTube friends and laugh about it.
I sometimes put things on my Discord. I had one, I can't remember, I don't know if I can remember what it said. There was one that was hilarious. I don't think I can remember it. But also the username of the person was like a really offensive username. And it was like, yeah, to be expected, I suppose. So yeah, if you leave a bad comment on my channel, it might end up on the Discord server and everyone will have a good laugh. So it
I know.
doesn't
I
go
mean,
to waste.
everyone's entitled to comment what they want, and I'm entitled to do what I want with that comment, whether it be delete it or send it to everybody I know. So,
Hmm. Yeah, occasionally there are things where you like people are saying offensive things. I get more upset if it's offensive to like a group of people that's like not me,
yes, yeah.
that kind of stuff. I'm like hide from channel. I love the way you can do that though, the way you just hide them from channel and they can think that they're still commenting on your stuff,
Oh, I
but
don't think
nobody can see it.
I just get rid of it. But I guess like I never even thought about that. Is that what that means?
Yes, yes. So you click hide from channel and it's like blocking them, but it doesn't tell them that they're blocked.
Oh,
So
okay. So they
they
can just
think
keep shouting
that
into
they're
the
like,
void.
yeah, they can like rampage, keyboard warrior, post whatever they want, and then nobody's seeing it.
Hmm.
But I think I guess it's so that they can't be like, why did you block me? It kind of
So
protects you a bit.
may I ask you more about your education? So, did you pursue higher education or did you go straight into your career?
So I had a big burnout. Like throughout my education, I was always like, I did all right academically, but I didn't really try very hard.
Mhm.
And then towards the last 2 years, so in the UK, our high school goes until you're 16. And then the last 2 years of high school, you do GCSEs, which are like your big exams, and you do like an exam for every subject, basically. And then you go to college, which is basically where you just do the same thing again, except from now it's called A levels and you do fewer subjects. And then you go to university at 18 if you want to. So for the GCSEs at the end of high school, for some reason, I decided, I don't know why, I decided, wouldn't it be interesting to be the kind of person who does really well? And I had this picture of somebody, this like character in my head who had like all these books around them at a desk. And I was like, wonder what it would be like to be that person. And so then I started doing a little bit more work and I started doing quite well. And I was like, oh, this is quite nice, because I was quite miserable, as many of us are at school. I absolutely hated it. So I was like, well, I don't really enjoy life that much, but this gives me a little boost of happiness when I do well. So then I became very fixated on it, and it became like my whole life was studying, and I had to, and then I did well, and then the more I did well, I was like, okay, I need to do better, I need to do better. And then it got to a point where if I didn't get full marks, it was like the end of the world.
Correct. Yeah.
And then I like, yeah, pushed and pushed myself, like stopped doing basically anything that wasn't studying, because I was like, well, I can do that when I'm finished with my GCSEs, and I'll just, kill myself now. And then when I finished the GCSEs, I'll be so happy that I've got good grades that it won't matter to me that I basically ruined my life before then. And like, this doesn't matter. So I'd like figure out what's the like how infrequently can I get away with showering and be acceptable and things like that, so I could spend more time studying, and then like didn't eat, like skipped meals a lot and things like that. And yeah, I've just basically kind of completely burnt myself out. I managed to finish the GCSEs, but I was like, I don't know, very much reaching a crisis point. Like I was not in a good place, and I don't know how on earth teachers did not think this person is not okay. But then I went to college to do A levels, and I was carrying on. I was still in the same kind of spiral of just needing to be working all the time. And then I just got to a point where I just had to drop out because I couldn't carry on. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember like I going to get the boss and just basically like having a meltdown in the street, and my mom was with me for some reason, and she was like, you just need to stop now. You can't carry on doing this anymore. So I dropped out then, even though I'd been obviously predicted to do quite well. And I've only just recently gone back to doing some studying through distance learning and trying again to see if I can do a psychology degree. But it makes me very nervous. I think I'm like traumatized by what I did to myself in that time, and just not knowing, which you can probably relate to, not knowing how to stop. Like if I get
Yeah.
latched onto something, how do you like, I didn't know how to balance it, basically.
Yeah, that was something I really, getting my degrees, like I just barely survived them. And I feel like when I think about going back, or because at one point I was thinking I was going to do a PhD,
Oh, wow.
and I when I think about going back, like I think like I could probably do it now that I know I'm autistic, but I would definitely be taking advantage of um support. I don't think I could do it without support. Like I really struggled, especially when I did the UK degree, because it was so much less structure than I was used to in a degree before. Like everything was just left up to, like, you were expected probably to be at lectures and things like that. But studying and preparing and getting like everything um together for your final paper or exam, like that was all up to you, and like the pacing of that was all up to you, and like staying on top of it. And I just couldn't do that by myself. Like I had no idea what to do, so I just tried my best and barely got anything done. Um or like I would um that was before I was being treated for OCD. So like if I didn't get the day started in like the perfect way, I'd just be like, okay, day's over. Try again tomorrow.
Oh,
So yeah. I I think that I could go back to it in a more healthy way, but now I'm like, I don't know that it would be worth it for me. Um, I don't know if it would make me happy, and I think a lot of the reasons I was pursuing all the degrees and everything was because I just didn't know what to do. Like, I couldn't figure
Mhm.
out who I was or what I was supposed to be doing. Um, especially, like, I don't know that I would have pursued the same things if I had known I was autistic, but not necessarily because I didn't think I could do them, but maybe I would have been like, "Oh, I'm doing this because I'm trying to make a place for myself and figure out who I am." And I just had this thought, like, if I just keep going and, like, pushing, then eventually I'm gonna get to the place where I know where I'm supposed to be, and that was never gonna happen. Ooh, get a little emotional, yeah.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. I just feel like I kept like when I say when I was inventing this version of me who like studied all the time, it's like trying to find I was always playing characters, I think, like making
Exactly, exactly. I
moments.
was gonna just come up with, like, anything that I did or any group that I ever joined or whatever, I was just constantly coming up with, like, a new character for myself, like, if I just put this on, then I will fit in and maybe it'll finally feel like me, which I think is, one of the reasons why so many of us, when we learn about our diagnosis and then we're confronted with this idea of what masking is, and, like, that's why so many people are like, "Well, if I've been masking my entire life, like, then who am I? What do I like?" I don't know, you probably get that question a lot on your channel, huh?
Yeah, it's really hard. I always feel like I kind of know who I am at home. I don't know how to make that fit with the rest of the world.
Mm,
That's what I'm still struggling with. Like I know who I am, but I also know why I'm not that person in public. If
yeah.
that makes sense. Like I feel like it wouldn't be palatable to a lot of people. And maybe that's the thing you have to get to the point where you're like, some people aren't gonna like me and that's fine. And for some reason that I suppose is from being a child and being picked on at school, maybe that is just like the most terrifying thing ever. That some people are gonna think, oh, they're not my cup of tea. But like, why does that matter so much still?
Yeah, I think now, like, with being in my 30s, like, I feel a lot more comfortable to, like, be whoever I am, even in public, but I still am figuring out who is that person? Like, why like, what do I like to wear? What kind of like, how do I react when I'm happy? Like, when if I'm not masking, like, what does that look like? What does it look like when I feel comfortable in a social situation? And those are all, those are things that I don't know because I've, like, shoved myself down for so long. So, I always tell people just give yourself grace and time.
Mhm.
Like, I feel more comfortable now than I did a few years ago, but I don't feel like I'm there yet.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes if you watch too many things, it's a bit like, oh, just unmask, just rip off the mask. And it's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
Like,
that brings up, like, something for me, like, the other day, somebody was asking in the comments, should I start a YouTube channel? And I was thinking, like, "Oh, this would be a very good, um, video to do for people," because the answer is I cannot tell you that. Like, I can't like, I'd like to just say, like, "Yeah, go for it." But there are so many, like, caveats to that subject, like, is that even safe for you? Like,
mm,
do you have a support system for that? What what country do you live in? Is it safe for you to talk about in the country that you live in the political atmosphere that you live in? Are you prepared for people to see you talking about it for the rest of your life? Will it have an effect on your job? And, like, there's so many things that you really do need to think about before you put your life out. Like, I know that, um, you've been self-employed, correct? So for you, it's like it's more of an open decision.
Yes, although at the time I was considering, which I still kind of am vaguely, like maybe one day going into psychology in some way. And particularly when I was uploading content about PDA, the pathological demand avoidance profile. When I uploaded that, I was like, do I want to do this? If I do this, am I literally destroying my chance of like ever being accepted onto any sort of course like that or whatever? But I was just like, whatever, okay, fine, I'll do it. But it felt really, really scary. I remember feeling sick when I was uploading that video.
There are some topics where other ASD YouTubers will like broach these topics on videos, and I'm like, man,
Yes,
you are not, I am not in that place yet. Like my
I
friend
feel that way.
Taylor Heaton's just been putting out some videos about like autism and sex, and I'm like, I'm not there yet, girl. She's so, she and I are friends, and we have been texting, and I'm like, I'm here to support you. I think you're doing great work. I think you're going to help people. I'm not there yet. So thank you for picking it up and just,
I think
you know,
the issue with me is like I often don't have an issue with speaking about these things, but then I sometimes question myself. I'm like, but should you? Like, do you need to have a bit more of a wall up? Because I am just, particularly when I was younger, I was worse. I've got a bit better at having some amount of boundaries, but historically, there
no, my
haven't been it.
entire childhood was like, Claire, there's a line and Claire always crosses it. Very often I would say, like, I would hear that I crossed the line, like I just had no filter, and that so it is encouraging to hear that I mean, sorry you went through that, but it's encouraging to hear that I'm not the only one who went through that. It's did you find that quite frustrating I'm talking to a British person. Did you find that quite frustrating to hear? Because I know that I always felt like I was just talking about, the facts. Like everyone else knew this in the room. Like, why couldn't I just talk about it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Even I mean, even now, I'm not great with it now. Like, I have to, go to children's parties with my son and talk to the other parents. And when there's like a silence, I'm like, okay, I need to fill the silence, and then just stuff starts coming out of my mouth. I was talking to people about it on my Discord afterwards. I was like, I just can't. I just end up talking about things, and then someone brings up autism or ADHD, and then I'm like, and then I have to like start talking about that and my diagnosis. And I'm like, I don't even know whether I wanted to tell people about that. But I feel like my brain gave me no choice. It just all fell out of my mouth. And now you know. So, okay, that's
No,
happened.
anytime that kind of stuff comes up, my eye starts going.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't help myself because um I I've heard other people in the community say this as well, that it can be like, especially being late diagnosed, I can't speak for others because that's not being early diagnosed isn't my experience, but um you go for so long being told like, you're talking too much, you said too much, that was inappropriate, that was rude, that you kind of train yourself to not say anything.
Yes.
And because you're like, well,
Mhm.
it's better for me not to say anything. And when I do say something, it goes wrong. So like maybe I just won't speak. And then I also felt like if I do share, it's always oversharing. So I totally get what you're thinking about. I don't have kids, so I don't have the experience of having to interact with other parents, but I think that might be difficult. Um, do you ever feel like a spy when they start talking about autism, and you're like, they don't know?
Well, this is the problem. I've told loads of them now. That's the thing. Because it was brought up, my brain was like, "Nah, let's just tell everyone." So, and one of the moms has an autistic child who is my son's best friend. So we have spoken quite a bit about autism, which is quite nice, actually. And she's really, really lovely. So that's been nice.
Do you feel
But
like
yeah,
she comes to you for like some clarity on behaviors and things like that?
I'm not, because my son's only like recently started school. but I think she said like, oh, it feels meant to be that, you know, her child is autistic and I'm also autistic. And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. And it is strange that like that's the person that my son gravitated towards in the class as well.
He probably
Um,
feels the most comfort.
yeah, I don't know what it is, but I'd noticed her like very early on and I was like, oh, I wonder, because I was just something about the way that she moved and I was like, oh, and then I'd been speaking to her mom because my son was playing with her and I was like, oh, she's very bouncy. And then she told me and I was like, oh, I'm autistic as well. So that was a great moment. That was the time when it was good. But it can definitely be hard when you're at these like 2 hour parties and you've got to be making conversation. And I always feel like I have to talk. And if this and like if a social, I don't know if you feel the same, but if a social situation like it's not going well, it's my fault. Even if the other person isn't giving much back.
Yeah, I think part of unmasking for me has been like being okay with not filling every space with something, because that was very difficult for me to like realize that I also heard this like a lot growing up, like you're just talking to hear your own voice, like that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I just thought that there was an expectation that there would be like you could who nobody wants to just sit in silence, right? Like that's what I thought. Um, but then again, like also it's not, I don't think it's just that we want to sit in silence. It's just that we don't want there to be any silence. And also there's like a huge issue with oversharing. So like where you might start off with like, um, oh yeah, our kids are in the same class. Like, and by the end of it, you're like, let me tell you my entire medical history, you know?
It's always medical history as well. I feel like it is. I don't, yeah, I think I've scared people off a lot by doing that as well. But I think sometimes for me, it's like I'm trying to make a connection with the person. And I think I sometimes appreciate it when people overshare with me
Yes.
because I recognize that as something that I do, maybe. I don't know. I'm like, oh, you trusted me with that information. That's really nice. And it makes me feel warm. And so I'm
Mm.
like, oh, if I do it to other people, then they'll think, you know, I obviously like them because I'm sharing all this personal information with them. But then I realize, well, not if some people want to say, like, how are you? And then they want you to just be like, I'm fine. And then
Do you
talk
feel like
about the
you
weather.
do it on purpose? Are you doing it on purpose though, or are you doing it? Because I don't feel like when I overshare, I'm not necessarily doing it on purpose at all. Like it's not
No, I wouldn't
cognitive for
say.
me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's conscious. I just think it feels like the thing that I want to do, so I just do it. But I think maybe that's why, because it feels associated with connection in some way. I
Right. And
don't know.
just wanting to be connected to people.
Yeah, and I think I
Especially when
desperately
we're
want people
undiagnosed.
to like me.
Yeah. Can you kind of speak to that? Because like when you're undiagnosed, you want to feel this connection to other people. Did you
Mhm.
feel like when you were undiagnosed that you were like seeking that connection, even though, I guess what I'm asking is, even though you didn't know you were autistic, did you sense that you were other or different?
Yeah, for sure. So like I had a very difficult time in school when I was younger. So when I first went to nursery, I think I just like flapped my hands and walked around on my own and just like stared out into space. That's why I'm just like, did nobody notice this and think, well, this is a bit interesting, but nobody did. And then like when I was a bit older, I was just told I was weird all the time. And I still have no idea why specifically because in the moment I was just like, I'm just here living my life. And then I just felt like people would just come up to me and be like, you're weird. And I was like, okay. So that was kind of a lot of the early feedback that I received. And that made me, like you say, just shrink into myself and not say very much and be very, very quiet. Um, yeah, I think when you get that feedback a lot, it does kind of potentially lead to you being like feeling desperate to be liked and to be approved of.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely had that. And I think that that can be really dangerous sometimes for autistic people. Like obviously a lot of people and a lot of women in particular end up in like abusive relationships and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my first relationship, I think I was just happy that to be liked by somebody when I think
Yeah,
back to it now.
any attention is good attention when you feel like you don't.
Yeah.
Nobody's
And
ever
and
gonna
just if someone
understand.
said they liked me, then I was like, you're the best person ever.
Oh my
You
gosh,
know?
yeah, autistic girls, we fall fast, okay? There's no like, I think there might be something there. It's like, this is it immediately.
Mhm.
It can be pretty dangerous. I remember hearing like before I even was aware of autism really, like that girls who were on the spectrum, like they were at risk for like entering that kind of bad situation and not really understanding why. And now in retrospect, I completely understand why.
Yeah.
Um, when somebody um, says that they accept you and they like want to be around you, and it's like really easy to fall into something that might not be that great for you because there's like you're just so open to wanting something, like wanting it so badly. Like I remember just like wanting to have a boyfriend so bad.
Well, I'd
And
had a lot of people in high school who like that who'd been, kind of bullies who had said things like, "You'll never have a boyfriend," and stuff like that was like one of the things they like to say to me. So it was like, I did also feel like I desperately wanted to be in a relationship and wanted to have a special kind of person. I think that's the thing, we can also get very attached to like one person, can't we? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I used to think too, like, why before I ever knew about autism or anything, I'd be like, if only I could just not speak. Because I felt like I was like pretty enough for a boyfriend. But then like as soon as I spoke, as soon as I like started interacting with someone, they were like, oh no way. This is not happening. A lot of the people who I dated um before I was diagnosed, I would date like they wouldn't know me necessarily beforehand. Like it would be like a um I'd be set up through like it would be a setup, or it would be somebody I met at a concert somewhere, and then we dated long distance. We weren't in the same hometown, so we weren't seeing each other all the time. So I think um I was able to mask a lot more. Like they weren't seeing my autistic traits. It's just kind of weird to like look back at your life and like see those patterns.
yeah,
Because I yeah, even my spouse now, like when we started date we did meet each other beforehand, but like when we started dating, it was like long distance for a long time. So we weren't like getting to see each other's behaviors or um and I was able to mask more, I think.
yeah. I feel like I never would have been able to get into a relationship with anybody who went to my high school, because it was like I had a bad smell. Like people didn't like me at all. It was just, and you couldn't. I remember this one time I got on quite well with this guy who sat next to me in some sort of language lesson. And I think because it was near a school holidays or something like that, we were allowed to move seats if we wanted to. And he at first was like, "No, he'll stay sitting next to me," because we were like, we weren't friends, but we got on in the lesson. And he was like, "Whatever, I won't move." And then people like started making comments about the fact that he hadn't moved. And then he moved because they were like kind of making fun of him for not moving and staying sat next to me. And I was like, "Yeah, you don't really want to sit next to me. That's not going to give you a good
Oh,
reputation." Yeah, but then I like kind of when I went to do college, which was where I met my husband, that's when I did like, I don't know if you've seen what, so I've mentioned it a few times in my videos. I did like this big reinvention of myself, which again was like another playing a character situation. And I changed the kind of clothes that I wore and how I did my hair and my makeup. And I was like, I'm going to be this perfect person, and I'm going to be this sort of person, and I'm going to be extroverted and blah, blah, blah. And made this character. And I went to a college deliberately that was further away, so I wouldn't have many people from my high school there. And it kind of worked. It kind of had a lot more friends there than I ever had done before, which was sad because yeah, it was the one time where I wasn't really being myself, and that's where I did the best socially. And it also contributed to me having to drop out because it was so exhausting to have to go in
yeah.
every day and try and be the perfect social thing.
Well, I feel like there was like times where I was definitely heavily masking and taking on different characters in high school and in college, but then there were definitely years where I was like, I'm just gonna be weird and just do whatever I want and just like own that. Um, but then like realizing, I think like midway through undergraduate that like it wasn't gonna like it wasn't working. I needed to fit in a different way. So I would just like, yeah, I would definitely say that ASD people like learn to be chameleons, like wherever they're at, like they're just trying to fit in and figure out like if I dress this way, if I act this way. And it takes so much planning too. I had no idea that people didn't like plan the way that I was planning for social situations. Like I remember I'd get comments on like always getting new outfits and stuff like that. And now I realize I was just like always just trying to dress for the like pick my costume for the occasion. So weird
Yeah,
to think about.
I think it can really help. Yeah, it really helps with masking like how you dress yourself. Like I will not leave the house without makeup on, and I think that is definitely like connected to masking and needing to present myself in a perfect way because I know I already struggle so much already. Like if I run into somebody that I know, I feel like if I'm not ready and I haven't done my face, then I'm just not gonna be able to talk to them. Like it does some of the work for me almost, like
I
makes me
get
look a bit
that.
more
I
human.
used to be like that a lot. Like I that was me. Like I would never let anyone see me if I didn't have like the full mask. And I don't know, I think the pandemic and quarantine really helped with that. And getting the diagnosis, like now I'm like okay with going out full gremlin. But I will say that I for a long time I wasn't like putting any effort in or anything into my appearance. I think I just was going through I'm doing it more now, but I just feel like I was going through a really long period of healing and like, oh man, I didn't think we'd get so emotional. Um,
Oh,
uh, you know, a period of healing of like I don't need to present, you know, it can be my choice. Like I can dress the way that I want to and put on makeup like for me to feel good, not because I feel like I need to have like this set, like this armor on or this picture on over my face of, you know, people like what people need to see. Um, but now I'm like, oh, okay, I'm ready to start wearing or putting more effort into my appearance because I feel comfortable and like I get to choose what I want to wear and what I want to look like. And it makes me feel better, not because not because it's just something I feel like I have to do to function. And I think that's where a lot of it can be confusing to people who aren't familiar with autism, like the entire masking thing. A lot of symptoms with autism where it's like, well, I do that too, and everybody does that, but I don't think that they realize that it's coming from like the place of intention. Like, what's the intention of you doing that? Sorry that you feel like you have to. If you feel like you have to, I'm sure you also like it because I can tell you got style. But
oh,
I totally understand the feeling of like I have to present a certain way for to be accepted in a situation. It really sucks.
yeah. I think before my diagnosis, though, the character that I was playing at that point was the parent character. So I wasn't letting myself like wear novelty earrings and stuff like I used to
Mm-hmm.
when I was younger. I'd stopped that and I'd put it all away. And I decided I'm gonna wear lots of long skirts and I'm still gonna wear like bright colors. I'm gonna wear colorful tights. And I had in my, I'm gonna wear stud earrings. I wasn't gonna wear like dangly
Mm-hmm.
novelty things anymore. And I decided, right, because I'm too old now. I decided to wear those things. Whereas now I'm like, no, I'm gonna go back to the things that I like. So I do feel like I'm definitely wearing more of the stuff that I like for sure now, which is a nice feeling. I don't know why. Why did I feel like 24, 25 was too old to wear like sparkly things? I'm not sure.
Too many Victorian novels, probably.
Maybe, I don't know. but it's quite nice actually. I do get comments from other parents saying they quite like my style, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. I appreciate it. Sometimes your weirdness is more accepted, I think, as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
Children are just really mean, and teenagers are really mean.
Yeah, they totally are. Um, I have friends who tell me like that their teenagers, what they say to them, and like, "Oh, mom, what are you wearing?" It's like, "You look cool. What are you talking about? What are they
I know
wearing?"
sometimes when I'm stimming, my son's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I've explained to him what stimming is and things now, but I don't know if he's really taken it in. He's like, oh, whatever. Because he's still really small. But yeah, it's so sometimes to him it's kind of confusing. It's so weird with my son because from when he was a baby, I was like, he is not like me. And I was waiting to see if he would be like me. And this is before I had any idea about autism. And he just wasn't. And I was like, oh, this is weird. I'd heard a lot of things about how I was as a baby.
Mm.
And like I didn't want to sleep and I was really clingy and all these things. And he was like the opposite. And I was like, oh, this is strange. Okay. But he's like a copy and paste of my husband. It's really weird.
Interesting. So it's like living with two of him.
Yeah, it's like that he just duplicated himself, literally, because my husband won't mind me saying this, but he used to have a bit of a stammer when he was at school. And my son sometimes has a little bit as well, like it comes and goes. But just even down to things like that, they're so similar.
But
It's so weird.
you don't have any kind of speech impediment, right? Like, did you have a speech delay or anything growing up, or?
No, I don't, not as far as I know, no. I did when I watch back videos, I did do a lot of the like echolalia and repeat and a lot of ignoring people. That was actually quite a big thing when I was a child. People would get annoyed with me because they'd ask me to do something for them, like pass me that. And I'd just like stop and it would take me too long to kind of process what they'd said. And they were like, oh, fine, I'll just do it and get really annoyed with me. And I was still there like trying to process what they just said. I'm like,
All autistic people would like to know why we can't hear the important things that people are telling us around us, but we can
yeah.
hear like the buzz of a light bulb. Like, I can't tell you why that is. Like, it's not, I would rather switch it, believe me.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. My husband's like he doesn't finish sentences anymore until he knows that I'm definitely taking it in. So he'll deliberately just say the very start of the sentence and then wait and then repeat the full sentence once he's got my attention.
I also went to a lot of concerts growing up, so like my hearing is bad anyway. What about your journey on YouTube? So what made you said you'd been over the years you've done like a bunch of different YouTube channels. Like why did you decide I'm going to share my autism diagnosis with everyone and
Mhm.
started YouTube channel?
Why did I decide to? I'm I think because I would never have found out myself if it wasn't for watching other people's content. There is I don't imagine how I would have found out myself because as I say my son isn't autistic, so I wouldn't have had that experience of him being diagnosed, which is a way a lot of people find out. So I
Yeah.
just felt kind of like I owe a lot to people for like finding that, giving me that information, and if I can pass that on and help a few people, that would be really great. And I enjoy filming and making videos, and I run a videography business. That's the other
Mhm.
thing that I do. So I was like, why not? I didn't expect. I did feel nervous about sharing very personal things on the internet, but I was like, well, not that many people are going to see it anyway. Like, I doubt that I'll have many people watching. So I was like, well, whatever. I did feel quite nervous about posting my first few videos for sure.
How do you feel the response was after like the first few videos? Were you like surprised by it or?
Trying to think back, I think I was still very much in the whole imposter syndrome, which I still
Mm.
think I am often. I think it's weird. It doesn't really go away even after a diagnosis. I thought that would cure it, but it's kind of still there sometimes. I think less so the longer it is.
I think it's because too, maybe do you feel like you surround yourself, like I know you have the Discord and everything, you surround yourself with other neurodiverse people, so I think it's easier to be like, I don't know if I'm actually autistic.
I think I think that's actually helped probably. I think the fact that so many people when I started posting were relating to like all these, this is just like these weirdly specific things, isn't it? That you felt like were things that you were the only person to ever have done in the whole world. And I think that makes you think, okay, well, if this was complete rubbish and the person who diagnosed me was just a quack or whatever you try and tell yourself when you've got imposter syndrome, like this many people wouldn't be relating to what I was saying, so there must be something here. So I think it definitely helped. But I don't know, sometimes I'll go out and I'll have a quite good social interaction and I'm like, well, maybe today I'm not autistic. Like I'm masked so well that I managed to convince myself, you know so I don't know. I think, and then like I say in the beginning, I did get there was like one particular person who I think was an autistic person, but they kind of almost seem to have a special interest in rejecting their diagnosis and other people's diagnosis.
Interesting.
And I noticed them commenting on other creators' content as well. So it wasn't just me. And I hid them from the channel eventually. I was like, oh yeah, you can do that. That's fine. But they would go on like a rampage of all these reasons, like analyzing my stuff in detail of why I wasn't actually autistic. And they were like, well, children flap their hands and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know, it puts you in an awkward position when even in real life, when people kind of imply like, oh, well, you don't really look autistic, that whole thing, because you're like, do I need to sit here and like do a full diagnostic session where I tell you about everything that happened in my life and all the painful experiences, particularly if they have a very negative perception of what autism is? Do I need to tell you about all my lowest points for you to believe me? Like, you don't want to be forced to convince people. I don't think you should have to do that.
Right, especially at, like when I hear things like that, I think so many things fill my mind, like about the way that I acted as a child. Like, oh, did you not think that being like having that reinforced out of me, like for my entire youth, like being told that the way I was acting was wrong and that being corrected, like that wouldn't change me at all? And like, do you think that autistic adults act like autistic kids? Like it
I think
doesn't.
that's a lot of the problem, isn't it? The whole thing that a lot of people see it as just like a children's disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think too, because of that, and because people are taught to like hide all of their autistic traits. Like I've heard too, like people say like, well, I was autistic as a child, but I was cured. And of course, like I would never get into a fight with somebody over that on the internet because it's like that's their journey. But um, the truth is it's not gone. Like it's not something that the symptoms, the outwardly negative symptoms to other people, like those can be changed, but that doesn't mean that the underlying person that you are underneath is like not autistic.
But I always find confusing is when people in my real life will sometimes, particularly people who are in, like older generations, will try and say, well, like, yeah, you do that, but I also do this, and we all have our things, that kind of thing. The whole everyone's a little bit autistic, even if they don't say
Yes,
those
yeah.
exact words. And it's like, okay, but look at your life and look at how your life has been, and then look at my life. Like, can you see, like, you're there working a full-time job in like a normal way, and then look at my mess that I have over here. And the decisions that I make, do you think that we're exactly the same? Because they're also the same people who will kind of laugh at you sometimes for being so weird. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
you just want me to be weird then?
So what is it? Is it
Yeah.
that I'm so weird, or is
Or
it
am I
that
so
we're all the
normal?
same?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
Exactly.
fair. Um, so how have you responded to, how has it been seeing your channel? And again, I'd be lying if I'm a little jealous.
Oh.
I'm and also excited and proud for you. Your channel has just exploded and people really resonate with you and love what you're doing. Like, how has that been for you? Did you expect it to be that way?
Definitely not. No, no. I'm very surprised by it. I I still don't really think I can process it very well. Like
Right?
I
It
don't
must just be like, okay, I'll just keep going.
yeah, it's a bit it like scares me to think about it too much because I feel like it could all just go away or like it's not real.
Like, because
Like I'm gonna
you could
jinx
post a
it.
video and an hour later it has 5,000 views. That's like a big thing.
I don't find YouTube feels like I don't understand it. Like, sometimes you just don't understand why things do well. Like I say, I've had very many channels in the past, most of them just kind of nonsense that I was uploading when I was like 13. But then I had a booktube channel that was at about 13,000 subscribers, like back in 2013. And that just it went quite well. And then it stopped at 13,000 subscribers. And then like nobody subscribed again. And then everyone started unsubscribing. So I've kind of had something go off and then stop and there'd be like a ceiling on it in the
Mhm.
past before. So I don't know. And with YouTube, you just never know what's going to do well. I don't understand it. The moment you think you've understood it, it will surprise you again. It's very confusing. So I don't know. I'm a bit scared of YouTube. I'm like, well, you could just click a few buttons on your end and then everything could all stop tomorrow. So
Yeah, I guess
I
that's
just,
true.
yeah, I feel a bit like when things are going well, you just want to keep it going.
Keep it
And it can
going.
be a bit
So you don't have like
anxiety
a,
inducing.
for everyone listening, you don't have like a special sauce that you're using to like, give me the formula. Like,
No idea. It's the most random thing ever. Like I feel like sometimes the more sure you are that you feel like something's going to do well, the less likely it is to do well.
I've talked to everybody. Almost everyone I've talked to has said the same thing. It's like the things where you're like, you feel really strongly about them and you feel like people are going to really resonate with them. Like those are the things that nobody watches. But then like the thing where you're like, whatever, here's just how I feel. And like
Mhm.
those are the things where it just explodes and people want to talk more about it. And they're like, this is the best thing you've ever put out. And you're like,
I
well,
think it's kind of freeing. It's kind of freeing to realize that in a way. I like I've been trying to post a bit more frequently. I did it in December and then January I just posted once a week and then I've done it in February and the start of March as well. And it's just nice to have like more chances to post because
mm,
you never know what people are what's gonna resonate with people. And also different people like different things. So I feel like you can keep more different people happy with the stuff that you post.
yeah, I think some of the things that you've been posting that I think differentiates you is definitely like uh, you comment more on what's going on culturally with autism, and you do that cross platforms, like talking about what's going on TikTok, talking about what's going on Instagram. Like, can you speak to what inspired you to do that?
Trying to remember. I don't know if maybe I took inspiration from like other niches and what people were doing in other areas of YouTube. Maybe it was somebody that I was watching that was doing something else because I don't like to, now that I'm making the content myself, I don't watch that much autism content myself at the
Mm-hmm.
moment because I'm worried about burning myself out again. Because that's what I would do when I was studying a topic. I wouldn't let myself like read a fiction book. I'd have to be reading something about that topic. So I'm very wary that my brain can do that. So I'm like, okay, if I'm doing my makeup, I'm just gonna listen to some music or something that's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with it. Give myself a little bit of a break, even when I don't want to, even when I'm like, no, autism. I'm like, you need to calm down. You're already doing it for so long. Yes, I'm trying to think what gave me the idea to do the first TikToks. I think it's just experimenting. I was just like, oh, I'll just do stuff and see what people like. And I know personally, I'm quite scared of TikTok. Like, I don't know if I'll ever have a
I'm not
TikTok
on it.
account.
I mean, I think I did for like a month once. I probably it's still there. Like I had something for my pet rabbits for a while. Um, and I posted like one or two things, but like I've never spent any time on that was like years ago, and I've never spent any time on it since. So I don't know anything about it. And um I don't know how it works. So
It's really scary. It just starts playing things at you all the time out of nowhere whenever I load it up. And then you click on a video and it starts playing a different video. It's really clunky and weird. It's really like there's so many like outtakes of me like trying to watch one and it starts blasting something else, like somebody being arrested in the street or something like that. I'm like, this is not this is not the content I was clicking on. It's always like the most random stuff that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to get into it because, like, in my mind, I'm like, it's not random, right? Like, you're
Ooh.
like you're being shown what it wants you to see.
But
So
yeah, I needed to see that arrest, yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, it does just love playing whatever is not the thing that you've clicked on.
interesting. Well, I think what you do is very brave, because you do respond to like what other people are saying, and I think you provide like the foil to it so that when people might be giving disinformation, you're saying like, no, let's examine that and talk about why it might be incorrect. And but I also think that you do it in a very thoughtful way.
Thank you very much. It's very kind. Yeah, I was very scared at first. I don't think I would have when I first started out, I would have done anything like that.
I think it is scary. Like, I don't know that I don't, not that I don't have the metaphorical balls to, to, to
Like I
like,
think about it at night. When I post anything that like vaguely could be perceived as negative in some way, then I'll like wake up in the night and be like, something terrible's happened and I've been cancelled. It's all gone. And like it'll really feel real in the middle of the night. And I'm like, calm down.
have you ever heard back from anybody where you've done a video where you're like, this is incorrect information? Have you ever gotten feedback on that from the people?
No, I'm not sure. The one that I did recently where I was talking about that Jubilee video where Abby's mom, people had been unhappy with some of the things that Abby's mom said. One of the other people who was in there has messaged me on Instagram, the guy Ian, but he's really nice. So just nice things so far. No, like nothing. Yeah, no one has. I don't know if they've seen it because it's across platforms. I think maybe that helps me. Maybe the TikTokers are not looking at what I do, so it's fine because
I
it
have
isn't really for them anyway. It's for like other people watching. Like I'm not expecting them to,
see it or
see it and change their ways or anything like that.
I'm even like I don't do a ton of review stuff, but like I've done the series on Love on the Spectrum. And it's not like I'm
Oh,
like watching the
yes.
footage. My spouse was like listening to me like in my office film these reviews, and he's like, is it really a review if you're just talking scene by scene what's going on? Isn't
Oh,
isn't that just like telling them what happens? And I'm like, oh, I guess that's just how in my mind you would do a review is you'd give every single detail and then
I really struggle. It takes me ages to script my videos. I spend way too long on it because I really struggle with what to keep in and what to leave out. And that was always a comment that I got in my school books was like giving too much information.
yeah, I'm like, it's like you don't, I have to remind myself, like, I don't need to like say everything that they said and then like walk them through, like, and then they went for a walk in the park and then they walked down near the water and he said this and she said this and then he looked at her like this. So I thought that nobody, like, why would anybody like watch those? Like, I would wonder if anyone watched them. And I did get one of the dates on Love on the Spectrum commented on my video, and I felt, I
Really?
know, it's like, here
Oh,
I've I've been noticed. Actually, but then I
oh.
felt very good about it because it was one of the I can't remember his name, so if he's listening, hello. Thank you for being so kind. It was one of the dates that Danny, I think it was Danny, yes, because it's Danny Mation. She had gone on a date with this gentleman and young man. And he had commented and said and thanked me for like being very fair. So I felt better after that because I'm like always trying to not, I'm not like ever trying to, it's hard to like react to somebody, but then also try not to be like judgmental or mean because like I don't know them and I'm
Yeah,
not in the situation. And it is a TV show that can be
yeah,
edited to look any way. So that's difficult.
yeah,
But he said
for
I did a
sure.
good job. And it was actually pretty funny
Mhm.
because that was like a date where people in the comments were like, I was like, I don't know. He said this and I think you know, maybe he does like her and he does need more time. And everyone in the comments were like, what are you talking about? It was very clear that he was not interested. And he made it very clear. And I'm like, well, I'm autistic, so it's gonna have to be a little more clear.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. I think I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. How do you know?
if somebody's like, let's see where this goes, I think they mean, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, no, I would be terrible at like I often wonder if I found myself single now, I'd be like, I'd be terrible.
Oh
I
my
just
gosh, no, I
always
look
was
back
really
on,
direct
yeah,
and it was fine.
no, I look back on like moments where like a guy would be like, oh, what are you doing after this? Like I'm gonna get a burger. Maybe you want to come with me or whatever. And I literally told a guy once, no, I have to go wash my hair. And I meant it.
That's great. Well, did you ever have the thing where people are flirting with you and you didn't realize at the time, and then afterwards you're like, oh,
Yeah, when that guy
maybe
asked me
that's
out
what
and
it
I
is.
didn't know.
Oh yeah.
I like didn't know, like I was like, oh, like later I'm like, I think that I feel really bad. I just turned that guy down. And I just didn't even notice.
Do you regret it or do you think it wouldn't have worked out anyway?
It probably wouldn't have worked out anyway. I'm trying to remember if I think my husband and I had just started talking at the time, but we weren't dating yet. Um, and this was
Probably for the
somebody else.
best then.
Pardon?
Probably for the best then. It
Yeah, I
probably.
think it's probably for
Although
the
maybe you
best.
had this whole other life with Burger Guy.
With Burger Guy.
Yeah. You'll
Um,
never know the one that got away.
I don't view it like that at all. Sorry. No,
No.
I don't feel like
I
he's the
didn't think
one
you did.
that got away. If it was that important to him, I think he would have tried a little harder. So I don't think he ever spoke to me again after that. So I
Well,
don't
that's a
think,
bit of a red flag anyway.
yeah, I don't think it was like that. Um, yeah, I think but it's dangerous to think that way as an autistic person, like especially with your past, because it's like so many things where you're like thinking about like where you misinterpreted things because you weren't speaking the same language and you weren't
Mm.
speaking in like the social subtext. It's like very dangerous to start thinking that way because like I don't know all it's not just romantic things, right? It's like everything.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's the problem when you are diagnosed, or at least for me. I just felt like I was mentally just replaying my life again and again and again. And then I think of like more things and be like, oh my gosh, that's why that happened. And that's why I didn't get on with that person. And that's why that person hated me. And all. It's just like goes on and on and on. And it sent me into a bit of a like depression for a while. It was not just, but you know, like when people say, oh, you just wanted to be diagnosed to be special or whatever, it was like, it was not. It was
No,
not.
it is both the most being late diagnosed is both the best thing that can happen to you and also the worst. It's like it's a terrible time to like sift through your life, especially in the beginning. Because at first, when you're just like waiting for your diagnosis, if you do choose, not that self-diagnosis isn't valid, but if you do choose to go and get a diagnosis and you're like waiting to see if what they're going to say, um, there's still that like, okay, well, maybe I'm not. And like maybe because it's very rare that a person thinks they're autistic and then they're not. But you know, maybe at the time, you know, you're thinking like, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm wrong. I was thinking, you know, I need to get a diagnosis because my whole life I was like told that I was dramatic and that I was overreacting and that I was like, it's really not that bad, especially when it came to illness. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't overreacting. And like, so I was thinking, okay, maybe I am. Maybe this is me overreacting. And what, you know, then you find out that it isn't you overreacting, and you find out that you like literally your whole life have been speaking a different language than the people around you, and that you're not hearing what they're saying and they're not hearing what you're saying. And like having to like come to terms with that, um, and everything that you've been through as a person, like that isn't a pleasant experience. I don't know what people think that like I the idea that people are like, it's trendy. Like, and I've heard even from teachers, they're like, oh yeah, kids think it's trendy. Like, what? No, that was not my experience at all.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's because a lot of content on TikTok and things like that is positive
Right.
sometimes. And people feel like everything has to be negative. Like if someone's doing a dance, then they can't be autistic, you know?
Yeah, I just think of like when I think about autism, I think of being alone and not wanting to be and not understanding why. And like that I was never going to connect with anyone in a way that I so desperately wanted to be understood. And um I feel that I've made so many inroads since being diagnosed. I've made a lot of progress. I don't feel as alone anymore. I'm able to have friends for the first time. But no, it's not. It's not a good, like, I don't think my hope would be that one day there would be nobody who was late diagnosed because we'd catch it. Everyone would be able to know younger and grow up knowing that that's what was different so that they could use that information to not have to go through what we went through.
Yeah, for sure. Do you ever feel like maybe your life would have been worse in some way if you had been diagnosed, though? Do you ever start thinking down that path?
Of course. Yeah, I'm sure you've been through that too. Like, well, how would it have been different? Um, I think everybody, I sorry, I can't.
Oh, that looks cozy.
Um, I'm covering up my leggings with this blanket.
I've
Uh,
got pajama pants on.
okay, good. Me too. Um, yeah, but I think anybody I've spoken to who's been late diagnosed has gone through that as well. I'm sure that you have, where it's like, what would have happened? Would I have dot dot dot? I'm sure it would have been totally different. And like, I think one of the healing points is to get to a point where you're like, where you're not thinking like things like the one that got away or whatever. Like coming to terms with where your life took you before knowing is a big step. Of course it would have been different. Of course. But then like would it have been negatively different, right? Like cuz I'm sure you know, parents when they're raising their kids, like they want the best for their kids. So if my mom was very active in making sure like when they wanted to hold me back in kindergarten, she didn't allow that to happen. She was like, I'm going to sit with my kid and make sure she can write her letters not backwards so that she can move forward. And
Mhm.
I'm going to do everything it takes like they're all of these meetings because they it was very obvious they thought there was something a little off. Okay. They just couldn't figure
No.
out what it was. Um you know, all of these things where my mom was like, nope, this is what's going to happen. Like, I'm going to help her and get her through. If the label of autism had been slapped on there, how would that have changed my trajectory? No freaking idea.
Mhm.
Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, would I have been in a different classes? Would I have been like all of these things where it's like, I don't know how it would have changed. Would it have been positive? Would it have been negative? Everything that I've done up until this point to like be sitting here, I just have to accept that. Like if I continue to think about it forever, then I'm never going to move forward.
Exactly. Have you ever heard the whole thing where you think that's interesting that it worked out like that way rather than like judging a situation? You're
That's a
like,
good way to
oh, it's
think.
interesting that I get to be a late diagnosed autistic person. I get to experience that existence out of all the existence I could have experienced. It's interesting. I think that kind of helps. Like, this is the life I got. I get to live one life, and this is the one I can explore. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so many like great experiences that were also terrible experiences. Like I don't know. I'm
It's
happy.
really hard. And
Yeah.
like the people who you met, you wouldn't have met otherwise, because I met my husband at college, which was like one of the worst experiences of my life.
Right.
but I still met him. What if I had done learning from home instead, which would have been good in some ways, but then I never would have met him. I
Hmm.
also worry, like, would my parents have like wrapped me in cotton wool and like would I have
Exactly. Who
pushed
knows?
myself as much? But then also I'm like, but there were times where you really needed to not push yourself that much and it was really bad. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's just tricky, but I know I'm really glad to have it now. And I guess that's all that matters. I mean, when I read stuff from the 90s, I was born in 96. I'm like, there was no way I was going to be diagnosed, probably. Looking at this information that was available at the time, you basically had to say there is something seriously wrong with my child. Oh my gosh. And you had to be looking at your child through quite a negative lens, I think, a lot of the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
And my mom didn't look at me that way, which was a good thing in many ways. So if I had had a parent who would have, pushed me down that pathway of diagnosis, they would have had to be looking at me a certain way. I mean, I'm sure people are diagnosed for all sorts of reasons. It's not necessarily like that for everybody, but I think the reason why I wasn't diagnosed is because I wasn't pathologized, which was a good thing in a way.
Hmm. For me, like the early intervention that I had, like with speech therapy and reading classes and things like that, being pulled out of the classroom, I think it was more seen as a like, what little fixes do we need to make to like just fix it and move forward? It wasn't
Yes.
seen as like an ongoing thing. Like once my speech was a little bit better and my reading was up to grade level, which was funny because then of course like I was off and away, just like all autistic or most autistic kids who are just like reading under their in the dark under the covers all night long because they're like, I'm gonna read. It's what I do now. Um, yeah, once all of that seemed to be squared away and I was doing well numbers wise in school and like well that way, then it was like, okay, well then anything else is just because you're a weirdo.
Yeah, I think it was the same with me. Well, I was put into a social skills class with like the only people being somebody who had selective mutism, who was like my best friend, and then a guy who was diagnosed with Asperger's at the time.
Hmm.
And they put me in I don't think they told my mom though that they'd put me in this group. And I'm like, were you not thinking maybe at that point? And then also, but I do remember being really jealous of this guy who was diagnosed with Asperger's at my school because he was allowed to read in the classroom at lunchtime. And I begged, I was like, please, can I do that as well? And they
No,
were like,
that's
no.
not what social people do.
Yes, because I was just social enough, I think, for them to be like, okay, you don't need it. So then I started just reading on the playground instead. But but I would have really loved to have that. So in situations like that, I was jealous. I was jealous of the guy who had the diagnosis for sure. And to be honest, he's done very well for himself now. I've looked him up recently, and I'm like, maybe I would have done better if I had had a diagnosis at the time.
Yeah, I think we'll find out for people. I think because so much of um what we know about autism and its expanded view and I think because of that um we're just still at an infancy level of understanding. So as we move forward, um there'll be sorry, I'm thinking 10 thoughts at once. I'm also thinking about Star Trek. As we move forward, there'll be like there'll be more information. But right now, I was just thinking like we're in a new frontier. That's why I was thinking about Star Trek. Um, we're in like this infancy, this new frontier of like understanding. So there isn't the data to say how it would have been different, but I think we will know in the future how. It's just not something that we're lucky enough to know now. Now I think one of the reasons I think women sharing their stories or anyone really publicly is so that we can gather that information. Because all I hear now when I talk to other people who are late diagnosed is I did not know that other people were experiencing what I was experiencing. So like what we need is for people to be gathering information to understand common experiences and identify what about those common experiences is autism and what is other stuff, so that we can know, like, in the future, like, we can say, like, oh, this is how it would change your trajectory to know or not to know.
Yeah.
I'm
I
sorry,
think
I'm talking too much. Thank you.
you're not. No, I think you've made some great points. I think it's really true. Sometimes I actually feel, I've said this before, but I feel a bit jealous is probably not the right word. But I look at people who do have autistic children and I'm like, it must feel kind of nice to correct things, like to go and get your child diagnosed while they're young
Mm,
and then make sure they're getting all the accommodations that you didn't get when you were at school.
yeah.
Obviously, like you don't want to just live vicariously through your child, and there can be problems with doing that, and it's not a reason to bring someone into the world to just try and correct everything that went wrong in your life. But I do think there must be something quite healing in that, in like, I'm gonna,
To be able to provide them with the support that you didn't have.
yeah, for sure. And it makes me so happy when I see children now, like in my job and just like around when they've got ear defenders on. Like so many kids you see with ear defenders on these days. And it makes me so happy, but it makes me kind of emotional sometimes because I remember how loud it was in the dinner halls and things like that. Like I'm sure you do as well. And it's like, just, I didn't know that I was allowed to feel like that was too much.
Right, it was like it's a bad reflection on you, not your surroundings.
Yeah. And exactly like you said earlier, for me, it was always like I complain a lot. I complain too much. And I'm too sensitive and just not very nice, very like negative and cynical. I think was how a lot of people would have seen me. Like I would come home from school every day and I'd be like, it stinks. And my mom would be my first thing. It stinks.
I had a lot of meltdowns coming home from school.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Because I think you've just kept everything bottled up all day. And that's the thing. When we're masking, we're not necessarily fine. It's just suppressed. Like
Mhm.
things can be postponed for later on, which I think makes sense as like a survival mechanism. Like sometimes you can not feel hungry because you're in like a high stress situation. And then as soon as you're out of it, you're like, oh, I'm starving now. Like I've forgotten to eat. And it's kind of like the same thing. I think you can push down your own needs for survival. And that's what masking is, basically survival. And so, yeah, it was definitely the same for me. And I felt like, why am I such a bad person when I'm at home? At school,
Mm.
I'm such a nice, polite, quiet person. And then when I'm at home, I'm not a nice person. And that made me feel really horrible about myself. And I don't think, because my mom didn't know, I don't think she always dealt with things in the best way. And I think she would agree with that now. But I think it was very difficult when she didn't know what was going on.
I think for me, I reflect back to like those moments of meltdowns at home, and I remember feeling like no one was hearing me, so I would scream louder. Oh, I just I feel for that little person, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and just feeling like, why isn't anyone listening to me? And now knowing that um it wasn't anyone's fault in that situation. Like, we just weren't understanding each other in that moment. Like, she couldn't give me what I needed because I wasn't communicating in a way that she would understand, or vice versa. And I just think of like all I wanted was so badly was to be understood and for somebody to understand what I needed. So I can see wanting to provide that for other people. Um, I think that's why autistic adults are very protective of autistic children.
Yeah.
Like when I understand why people who or autistic people get up in arms about, what autistic parents or parents of autistic children, when they say something and they get up in arms and there seems to be like a lot of butting heads. And I
Yeah.
think it's sad because I think, um, the the end goal for both groups is the same thing, but
Yeah.
there's a different understanding about where it's coming from, where it's like, um, we're coming from a place of, like, personal understanding. Mm, I'm trying to think of, like, how I could describe it for people to understand it. Maybe we're watching the same Studio Ghibli movie, but one of us is watching it dubbed and one of us is watching it with the subtitles, where it's like you can still understand the story, but then, like, when you watch it with the subtitles, you're, like, actually understanding what they meant with the Japanese and not just, what sounded right to dub it with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. To me, that's, like, what it's like, where it's like we're coming at it from we're seeing the same things, but we're interpreting them very differently. I'm hoping that one day I'll figure out a way that I can help with that and help to bridge the gap, which is why I appreciate that there are so many autistic parents, sharing their stories because they can see it from both directions, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think for me, when I had meltdowns, like when I came back from school and things like that, I felt like, I don't know if you felt the same, like it was my responsibility to fix. People felt like it was my responsibility to fix myself and like I needed to do better and to be better. And I felt like, but I don't know why this is happening to me. And
Mm,
I feel like you should be able to help me as my parent, like you should be able to fix it and take it away because it feels like something that's happening to me.
mm.
And then it felt like it was put onto me, like, oh no, no, you need to sort it out. And I'm like, well, if you don't know how to fix it, how am I supposed to know how to fix it? Because I was just born here and this started happening to me, and I don't know how I'm supposed to have all the answers. But I think it was, I guess, always seen as like a behavior issue, is how people will view it. So it's
Right,
like
and
you
I
just
think
need to behave better.
autistic kids like to understand, um, why a behavior is incorrect, and that's really hard when a lot of social behaviors are only incorrect because of a social norm, and they don't really have anything to do with, like, logic.
Yeah.
Um, so just to be told, like, "That's the way it is, so don't act that way," is a very difficult to be told honesty is the best policy, but then you're not actually supposed
Oh
to
yeah.
be honest. Like, those are very confusing things for an autistic kid to understand, when, like, we just wanna do the right thing. So, if the right thing is to always tell the truth, but then you tell the truth and then nobody likes you because you're too people want to be lied to, like, how are you supposed to navigate that as a child?
No, and I think I still have difficulties with communicating with my mom sometimes. I think it's still because I basically don't I have like no ability to mask with my mom at all. I have no ability to filter. I don't know if you feel the same. When you're just very comfortable with someone, I'm like, there is no filter. It's like the most extreme with her. And we butt
Yeah,
heads a lot because of it, I think.
my mom, like, when she heard that, like, one of the things that she knows that I say when I'm, like, accepting a compliment, I'll say, like, "Oh, thank you, that's so kind." So anytime I say that to her, she's like, "Are you masking?"
Oh, how does that feel when she says that? Do you feel perceived? I
Like,
feel
I don't
perceived.
know if I'm masking. It's just what I say, okay? It's my script. What am I supposed to say?
Yeah, I always wonder if people feel like I'm masking in videos. And do you feel like you mask in videos? What would be
I
your
mean,
answer
to an
to that question?
extent, because people call you out on it all the time, right? Like, you're not acting the same on the live as you do on the video. You're not
Mm,
acting the same. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, like, I'm reading from a list of points and I'm trying, like, I changed the way I do it. Like, I don't even do like a full on script anymore. Like, I just have like talking points, because people said I was too stiff. And then, like, but they also like scripted videos and they like having points. Um, so yeah, I hear a lot of different things. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, there's a difference between masking and acting, I guess. But like, do you think a person who like a reporter, do you think that they talk the same way when they're reading the news as they do when they're like hanging out at home? No.
Exactly. And I think there's obviously a lot of autistic people who are actors. And I
Right.
think it's just like when you're talking to a camera, you're on your own. And I don't think people always realize that. Like you're in a room by yourself, just
There's
with the
no
camera.
winning. There's no winning because they're like, well, then let me see you stim. So then you let yourself be more free, and then or you're like, okay, well, I can't just like do it for you. Like it's not like just a thing. Or like you do something and they're like, that's too weird. Don't do that. Or like it's like there's no winning with like what people want.
Oh yeah, no, I can't even read it anymore. Because also with me, I'll make a point. I can say anything, and people will tell me why I'm wrong. Like I could literally just be like, "There are clouds in the sky," and then there'd be something, some reason. Well, actually, clouds. It's like there's always something. I think at one point in one video, I mentioned veganism. And then I got this really long comment, and this person was probably really nice, and it probably just activated something that they wanted to say anyway. But I had this long comment about how being vegan and plant-based is not the same thing, actually. And I'm like, I have no idea where that came from. And I've been vegan for like 14 years. And they were like, vegan is actually a moral philosophy. It is not just a diet. I literally just said the word vegan. That's all I said. It feels
Yeah,
like you don't have to say much.
people, yeah, there's something about, and I'm so, again, I always want to preface anything I say about like what goes on in comments, whatever. Thank you everyone for the support, and like the support is overwhelming, and I love the people who are supporters of my channel and subscribe and everything, and I really appreciate that. But yeah, that sometimes people will like people from behind the comments, there's no like it's like, okay, you said that. That's my response is like, okay, well, there you have it. That's why I'm very
Yeah.
happy where I've recently given myself permission not to respond to every comment. Like I will like heart, like I read it or whatever.
Yeah, I think it can just be a lot of information if you're trying to read everything. And it's like sometimes people will leave a big essay about something, and I'm like, oh yeah, I actually agree with you. But I can't, like when you're speaking in a video, do you ever feel like you can't clarify every word that you say? Like every
Right,
sentence,
right.
there's
Or yeah,
always so much that's like unspoken, implied.
somebody will be like, actually, and you're like, well, that is a good point, and something I probably would talk about if the video was going to be 800 hours long. I mean, we could definitely go into like, well, that's hard too, because you're talking to a group of people, um, which we're part of,
Mhm.
where every detail matters.
Yeah.
So, um, I just try to be very understanding of my audience and where they're coming from, right?
Yes,
So if they're
exactly. I
pointing out a
feel the same.
detail, um, or saying something that like had like maybe a good way to say it is like autism doesn't exist in a vacuum. So like sometimes we say rude things to each other and we're not trying to be rude.
Yes.
Sometimes we're not socially appropriate with each other and it's not on purpose. And it's really important to remember that. So when somebody reacts to something in a video that I've done where I'm feeling like, gee, that was a little sharp, or um okay, just because I didn't break it down into like the 10 subpoints doesn't mean that I wasn't thinking about that when I talked about it. I just have to remind myself that it's not coming from like a mean or nasty place all the time. Sometimes it
And
is, I'm sure, but
yes, but that can be kind of hard to tell sometimes,
yeah, it
particularly when
can.
you're getting a lot of comments from people who are not autistic who don't really understand. And usually I just try, and if I do respond, I'm always trying to be very polite and like understanding to what someone's saying. And there have been times where I've done that and I thought the comment was intended to be a kind of hate comment. And then they respond and they're like, oh, thank you for being understanding. People usually misunderstand me and think I'm being mean, and I don't mean to be. And it's because they're also autistic. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I was nice.
Well, there's been times where I feel like my response is a bit pointed, where somebody will say something and I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that, but like what's the best way to be polite? I don't know. I'm just happy that people are understanding. I try to be understanding, and then I hope that they're understanding back. But yeah, sometimes people will take what you say and they'll be like, you didn't think about this, or you didn't mention this in particular, or you
Mhm.
didn't go into a full explanation of this. And it's like, well, not in this 10-minute video, I didn't, I guess.
Yeah, it can be really tempting sometimes because I think we can also, like you say, get the urge to correct things, and it can be really tempting to respond. And I just am often, I'll type something often and I'll be like, nah, whatever, it's fine, I'll just leave it. It's fine, I'll talk about it in another video. Can give you more video ideas of things to do in the future rather than like getting into a discussion. Like there's nothing productive about that. And like if something's really offensive, then just, hide that person from channel so I don't see them again.
Yeah, I think, and I talked about this before, like I have had to give myself permission. I think in the beginning, I would let things get to me, and I didn't realize that like I don't need to like entertain comments that make me feel uncomfortable, or I don't have to respond to things that I don't agree with. I can just like block or, erase people's comments if they're not something that I get to curate the space that I'm providing for people. So if it's not something that I feel is a helpful thing for our community, I don't have to keep it around. Like
Mhm.
I don't have to deal with hate speech or anything like that if I don't want to.
And people can be really funny about that. There's the whole thing of like, oh, they're deleting comments. They're deleting comments as if you're like trying to hide something or
Like,
something like that. And it's
yes,
like,
I am.
yeah, it's like sometimes negativity breeds more negativity as well.
Right.
That's
Well,
the
yeah.
issue.
It's like don't feed the trolls, right? Well, I think we should start wrapping up only because we've been talking for a long time. I feel like I could
You're gonna
talk
have
to
a
you
lot
all
to edit.
afternoon. I know that, but I'm loving it. Like I could talk to you all day.
Oh,
This is so fun.
oh,
What
me
a great
too, me too.
Um, thank you for coming on the show today. What would you say to an autistic person who's just finding out that they're autistic?
I would say you need to give yourself time. You need to let yourself feel a lot of things that are going to be difficult to feel. And the way that you feel immediately is not probably how you're going to feel in even a few weeks, a few months' time. You need to give the people around you time to understand as well, because people are going to say a lot of things that aren't perfect, probably to start with. Like my husband had no idea what autism was at all, and now he's very understanding. But at first, he was like, really? He was quite skeptical when I first told him. Um, and I think again, like with the whole unmasking thing, you might hear a lot of people say online that you need to just unmask and like be yourself now. And I think in a way that can sometimes make you mask as an autistic person, if that makes sense. You can like construct a new mask of like what you think an autistic person should be like. And I think like we've said, I feel like we're both still on our journey of, and we probably always will be. I don't know, will it ever be finished? When do you go like, oh, I'm unmasked now? Like, I don't know. I think it takes time. You got to give yourself time to get used to it. And to maybe you will have to go back and process a bunch of stuff that happened in your past, and that isn't the most fun thing, but it won't feel as raw forever.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks. That
That's
was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today. Everyone, if you have not checked out Meg's channel, what are you doing? Where have you been? Are you living under a rock? And if so, that's fine. We support that here.
Yeah.
But definitely go and check out her channel. I'm autistic now what? And hopefully this won't be our last conversation. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank
All
you
right.
very much for having me.
Bye, everybody.